In 1950, Detroit had the highest per capita income in America, and nearly 2 million residents were living the American dream. Just 20 years later, the city lost 140,000 residents almost overnight. Property values collapsed by 60%, and tanks were rolling down city streets. How did the nation's richest city become deadlier than a war zone? What happened in those 10 catastrophic years that America still has not recovered from? Detroit in 1950 was the envy of American cities. Nearly 1.85 million people filled its neighborhoods, drawn by the promise of steady work and rising wages. The city's heartbeat pulsed from the factories of General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, where almost 300,000 men and women built the machines that powered the world. Paychecks from these auto giants lifted families into the middle class, filling blocks with new homes, cars in every driveway, and children in bustling schools. What set Detroit apart was how prosperity crossed racial lines. Black and white families alike found real opportunities to own homes and build savings, a rarity in mid-century America. The city's per capita income led the nation, outpacing even New York and Chicago. On Saturdays, Woodward Avenue buzzed with shoppers, and the skyline glimmered with the confidence of a place that believed its best days were ahead. Factories ran around the clock, and neighborhoods thrived with corner shops, churches, and parks alive with families. Pride in hard work and community ran deep. Detroit's strength seemed unshakable, its future certain. The city's success story was written in steel and rubber, in the hands of workers who believed that as long as cars rolled off the lines, their lives would keep getting better. July 23, 1967. Sirens wailed across Detroit as police moved in on an unlicensed bar on 12th Street. The raid sparked a fury that exploded into 5 days of chaos. By the time it ended, 43 people were dead. Another 1,189 lay wounded. Flames devoured more than 2,000 buildings, leaving entire blocks gutted and families homeless. Tanks rolled through city streets under orders from President Johnson, who sent in federal troops to regain control. Helicopters hovered overhead, their searchlights sweeping across neighborhoods that had become battlegrounds overnight. Local officials watched as fire crews struggled to reach burning homes, sometimes dodging gunfire or rocks. The police force, already stretched thin, found itself overwhelmed. Looting spread block by block. Storefronts that had stood for decades were smashed, their shelves emptied in hours. By the fifth day, the city's confidence was shattered. Headlines in the Detroit Free Press tallied the destruction, deaths, injuries, and a skyline choked with smoke. The violence didn't just take lives and buildings, it fractured trust in the city's ability to protect its people. Families who had felt secure now feared for their safety. Business owners, faced with blackened ruins, questioned whether to rebuild or leave for good. Detroit's sense of order had been broken, and panic rippled through every neighborhood, setting the stage for a mass exodus that would change the city forever. Within days of the last fires going out, Detroit's neighborhoods began to empty. The panic set off by the riots moved faster than the flames themselves. Families who had lived on the same block for decades packed up overnight, selling their homes for whatever they could get. In just 18 months, 140,000 white residents left the city. The pressure to move was not always subtle. Suburban real estate brokers, sensing opportunity, fanned fears with whispered warnings and mailed flyers. Houses at rock-bottom prices from anxious owners, then flipped them at steep markups to black families desperate for a foothold, often saddling buyers with harsh terms or balloon payments. The market collapsed under the weight of so many for sale signs. In the hardest hit corridors, property values dropped by nearly 60%. Houses that once symbolized security and pride now sat abandoned or sold for pennies on the dollar. Entire blocks went quiet, the sounds of children replaced by the echo of empty streets. Some homeowners simply walked away, unable to find buyers at any price. Behind the scenes, blockbusting fueled the chaos. Brokers like Edward Lang in the Northwest neighborhoods racked up dozens of quick sales, reaping profits as panic spread. But for most, the exodus meant loss of neighbors, of savings, of any sense that Detroit was still a safe bet. The city's wealth began to bleed out, setting off a chain reaction that would soon cripple its ability to function. Detroit's city ledger told a story as grim as any burned-out block. Between 1970 and 1975, tax revenue plunged from $333 million to $277 million. even as inflation pushed costs higher. The city's ability to pay for basic services simply evaporated. Police staffing fell from 5,500 officers to just 3,900. Patrol cars sat idle for lack of fuel or repairs. Entire precincts covered twice their old territory, leaving neighborhoods exposed. An ex-officer recalled that 2 cars covered 20 blocks, and if you called, you waited. Fire crews faced their own nightmare. With stations closing and trucks aging out, response times tripled. Flames could eat through a row of houses before help arrived. In some districts, families learned to keep buckets of water by the door, hoping to hold off disaster until the sirens finally echoed down their street. Streetlights blinked out across the city. By 1979, more than 40% were dark. The city council slashed the lighting budget, deactivating thousands of lamps. Night fell heavier in Detroit than almost anywhere else in America. On those shadowed corners, crime took root. Residents avoided certain blocks after dusk, knowing police might never come. Schools emptied, too. Enrollment fell by 35% in just 10 years. Buildings that once overflowed with children became echo chambers of lost promise. Teachers faced classrooms with more broken windows than working radiators. For the students who remained, the future seemed to shrink with every shuttered wing and every friend who moved away. Everywhere, the same pattern repeated. Less money, fewer people, more danger. The city's safety net unraveled, thread by thread, leaving Detroiters to fend for themselves. In 1974, Detroit's murder count hit 714, an average of nearly 2 homicides every single day. The city's per capita murder rate soared to 52 per 100,000 residents, outstripping every other American city and drawing national headlines that compared Detroit to Saigon at the height of the Vietnam War. Newspapers ran a daily tally of the dead, as if tracking a grim scoreboard. Reporters described families barricading doors at night, children forbidden to play outside, and residents too afraid to report crimes. The violence didn't discriminate. Elderly neighbors killed for Social Security checks. Children lost to stray bullets, witnesses silenced by fear. While the streets grew more dangerous, the economic foundation collapsed just as quickly. Between 1970 and 1980, Detroit lost 310,000 white residents and 160,000 jobs. The auto industry, once the city's pride, buckled under the pressure of the 1973 oil crisis and a flood of Japanese imports, which grabbed 20% of the American market by the end of the decade. Factories that once ran around the clock shuttered one after another. Chrysler, on the verge of bankruptcy, begged Congress for a bailout in 1979 as thousands of auto workers lined up for unemployment checks. As jobs vanished, so did hope. Unemployment climbed to 18%, double the national average. Arson became a desperate solution for homeowners trapped by redlining and worthless deeds. More than 20,000 fires tore through the city each year, leaving entire blocks hollowed out. Oakland County, just across the border, boomed with new malls and subdivisions, a stark contrast to Detroit's empty streets and boarded windows. The city's decline was no longer a slow bleed, it was a free fall, with every crisis feeding the next, and no end in sight. Detroit's scars remain visible today, with tens of thousands of abandoned buildings, a population less than half its peak, and wounds that shape every debate about urban America. The lesson is clear. When the systems fail, it isn't just history, it's the future at stake. What do you think?